Perhaps you have already felt this. That moment when the veil is torn away and you see the world as it really is, not as we would like it to be, not as we were taught to see it, but in its rawest and most disturbing nakedness. It is a painful, almost violent awakening that tears us from the comfort of our illusions and confronts us with a reality we did not ask to know. Today we will explore the price we pay for consciousness and how Albert Camus teaches us to transform this wound into freedom. There is a moment in every person's life when the world reveals itself in its most naked and disconcerting form. It may happen in the morning, as you watch the mechanical movement of people going to work, all stuck in their automatic routines, as if they were actors playing roles they never consciously chose. Or it may be during a seemingly normal conversation, when you realize that the words coming out of people's mouths are empty, repetitions of phrases they have heard somewhere, echoes of thoughts that were never truly theirs. It is at that moment that something inside you breaks definitively, and you realize that you have spent years, perhaps decades, living in a kind of collective somnambulism. Albert Camus described this experience as confrontation with the absurd, that moment when the mask of normality falls away and we reveal the total inherent meaninglessness that permeates human existence. It is not a comforting revelation. It is brutal, almost unbearable, because it forces you to question everything you believed in, all the values you embraced, all the certainties you built about who you are and what really matters in this world. Camus knew that this discovery is both a curse and a gift. A curse because it condemns us to live aware of the absence of cosmic purpose, but a gift because it frees us from the shackles of others' expectations and empty promises of manufactured happiness. When you see the world as it really is, you realize that most human concerns are artificial constructs, power games disguised as importance, personal dramas inflated to give the impression that our lives have a transcendental meaning that they do not actually have. The first reaction to this realization is almost always shock. You look around and wonder how other people can go on with their lives as if nothing has changed, as if they still believe the comforting stories that society tells itself. It's as if you've woken up in a world of sleepwalkers, where everyone performs precise and complex movements, but no one is really awake. Your friends continue to talk about their professional ambitions as if success were a matter of life and death. Your family persists in repeating the same behavioral patterns, generation after generation, as if they were immutable natural laws. The news insists on presenting world events as if each one were laden with profound meaning, when in reality you realize that they are just waves on the surface of an indifferent ocean. This perception brings with it an almost unbearable existential loneliness. It is not the physical loneliness of someone who is physically isolated, but the ontological loneliness of someone who has awakened to a reality that most people prefer not to see. It is the loneliness of Sisyphus, the mythological character that Camus chose as a symbol of the human condition, eternally condemned to push a rock up a mountain, knowing that it will always roll back down, but finding in this very awareness of absurdity a strange form of freedom. The price of this clarity is high, because it forces us to take full responsibility for our choices. When you realize that there is no predetermined script for life, that there is no higher authority dictating what is right or wrong, that there is no cosmic purpose waiting to be discovered, you become completely responsible for creating your own meaning. This is both liberating and terrifying. Liberating because it means you no longer have to conform to the expectations of others or seek approval in value systems you did not choose. Terrifying because it means you can no longer hide behind excuses. You can no longer blame circumstances or other people for the decisions you make. Camus called this condition absolute freedom, but warned that few are prepared to bear the weight it brings. Most people prefer to live in an illusory freedom, imagining that their choices are determined by external forces, that their emotional reactions are inevitable, that their behaviors are products of their fixed personality or personal history. But when you see the world as it really is, you realize that every moment is an opportunity to choose, that you can, at any moment, decide to be completely different from what you were in the previous moment. Pause for a moment and reflect on your own experience. Have you ever felt that weight of conscience, that moment when you realized that many of the things you considered important were just empty social constructs. Write in the comments just "I feel that too" if this experience resonates with you. Knowing that you are not alone on this journey can be the first step in transforming this painful awakening into something liberating. Your response can also help others who are going through the same process to feel less isolated. This new perception of reality also radically transforms the way you relate to suffering. Before, when you were still wrapped up in comforting illusions, suffering seemed like an injustice, a flaw in the system, something that needed to be avoided at all costs or explained away with comforting narratives about personal growth or divine purpose. But when you see the world in its existential nakedness, you understand that suffering is simply an intrinsic part of the experience of being alive. It is not a punishment, it is not a lesson, it is not a cosmic test. It is just the natural experience of a conscious being, confronted with the indifference of the universe. Camus realized that this acceptance of suffering as a natural condition does not make us cynical or bitter, but frees us from the neurotic need to find comforting explanations for every pain we face. You stop wasting energy trying to understand why bad things happen to good people, or searching for hidden lessons in every difficult experience. Instead, you learn to face suffering with a kind of stoic dignity, recognizing that it is part of the texture of existence, no more or less significant than the joy or beauty we also experience. But perhaps the most challenging aspect of seeing the world as it really is confronting the reality of death in a visceral and immediate way. Not death as an abstract concept that happens to other people at some distant point in the future, but death as a constant presence, as a horizon that shapes and gives urgency to every moment we live. When you awaken to the stark reality of existence, death ceases to be a taboo or a source of neurotic anxiety and becomes a silent advisor who constantly whispers the most important question of all. If you knew you were going to die tomorrow, how would you choose to live this moment? This awareness of finitude does not paralyze us as many fear. On the contrary, it frees us from trivial concerns and forces us to confront what really matters. Camus observed that it is precisely the certainty of death that makes life precious. If we were immortal, every moment could be infinitely postponed, every experience could be delayed indefinitely, every relationship could be neglected because there would always be time to fix things later. But knowing that our time is limited, every honest conversation becomes a gift, every moment of beauty becomes a treasure, every act of courage becomes an affirmation of human dignity in the face of emptiness. The most profound transformation that occurs when you accept to see the world as it really is concerns the way you relate to other human beings. Initially, this new perception may create a sense of detachment, as if you were observing humanity through a glass, seeing people trapped in their personal dramas without being able to fully share their concerns. But gradually, you discover that this apparent alienation actually paves the way for a deeper form of compassion. When you understand that all human beings are fundamentally alone, facing the same absurd condition, struggling to create meaning in an indifferent universe, you develop an empathy that transcends superficial differences of class, culture, or ideology. You realize that the person who yells in traffic, the co-worker who acts arrogantly, the neighbor who complains about trivialities, are all facing the same existential reality as you. Everyone is trying, in their own clumsy way, to cope with the discovery that life does not come with an instruction manual, that there is no higher authority to solve their dilemmas, that each person must create their own path through the maze of existence. This understanding does not make us condescending or paternalistic, but helps us develop a more genuine patience with human flaws and limitations, including our own. Awakening to reality also completely revolutionizes your relationship with time. Before, when you still lived under the illusion that life had a predetermined purpose, time seemed linear, directed toward some future goal. You constantly postponed happiness, imagining that it would come when you reached certain milestones. A degree, your dream job, the perfect relationship, your own home, financial independence. The present was always a means to an end that never fully materialized. But when you accept the absurd nature of existence, time becomes something radically different. Each moment becomes complete in itself, no longer a step on the ladder to future happiness, but a unique and unrepeatable opportunity to consciously experience the mystery of being alive. Camus wrote about the importance of living the present intensely, not because the future doesn't matter, but because the present is the only tangible reality we have. The past exists only in memory, the future exists only in the imagination. But this moment, with all its imperfections and possibilities, is the only genuinely real thing we have. This shift in temporal perspective does not make us impulsive or irresponsible, but helps us discern between concerns that deserve our energy and those that are merely anxious projections onto imaginary futures. Perhaps one of the most liberating aspects of this new way of seeing is how it transforms our relationship with failure and success. When you still believed in conventional narratives about what constitutes a successful life, every failure seemed like confirmation of your inadequacy. Every success seemed like temporary validation of your worth as a person. You were constantly evaluating your progress against external metrics, comparing your achievements with those of others, feeling alternately superior or inferior depending on how your life fit into socially approved molds. But when you see the world as it really is, you realize that these categories of success and failure are artificial constructs that have very little to do with the intrinsic value of a life experience. The successful executive who hates his job but stays in it for social status is not living any more meaningfully than the artist who has never achieved public recognition but finds deep satisfaction in his creative expression. The person who has built a perfect family in the eyes of society but feels emotionally disconnected from their loved ones is no closer to human fulfillment than the one who has chosen a lonely but authentic path. Camus teaches us that the only true failure is to live inauthentic lives, betraying our own nature to meet expectations that were never really ours. This transformation in the perception of success and failure naturally leads to a profound change in the way you make decisions. Before awakening, your choices were often motivated by a complex mix of fear, hope, and social pressure. You chose careers based on what your parents expected, relationships based on what society approved, hobbies based on what seemed impressive to others. Your decisions were constantly filtered through the question, "What will others think?" Or, "Will this get me where I should be?" But when you accept to see reality without filters, your decisions begin to emerge from a completely different place. You start asking yourself, "Is this true for me?" And, "Does this honor who I really am?" This change doesn't make decisions easier. In fact, it often makes them more difficult, because you can no longer rely on ready-made formulas or the approval of others. Each choice must be made consciously, taking full responsibility for the consequences. But this difficulty comes with a sense of internal alignment that you never experienced when you were trying to please external expectations. The existential loneliness that accompanies this new perception of reality gradually transforms into something different. Initially, as we mentioned, there is a painful isolation, a feeling of being disconnected from a world that seems to still be asleep. But over time, you discover that this loneliness is not empty or desperate. It is a loneliness full of possibilities, an inner space where you can finally find yourself without the constant interference of the external voices that previously dictated your thoughts and feelings. In this conscious solitude, you develop a more honest and compassionate relationship with yourself. You stop judging yourself by the unrealistic standards you have absorbed throughout your life and begin to know yourself as you really are, with all the contradictions, limitations, and potentialities that this implies. Camus spoke of the importance of becoming friends with yourself, of developing an inner companionship that does not depend on external validation. This friendship with yourself is not narcissism or self-indulgence, but a mature acceptance of your own imperfect humanity. If you feel ready to explore these existential questions more deeply and connect with others who are on the same journey of awakening, consider subscribing to the channel. Here we have created a space where we can explore together these fundamental questions about what it means to be truly alive. It's not about having all the answers, but about having the courage to ask the right questions and walk consciously through the complexity of human existence. What Camus realized, and what you too can discover through this transformation of perception, is that accepting the world as it really is does not condemn us to pessimism or despair. On the contrary, it opens us up to a deeper and more genuine form of joy. It is joy that comes not from the illusion that everything will eventually make sense, but from the discovery that we can create moments of meaning and beauty even though we know they are temporary. It is the joy of Sisyphus, who finds satisfaction in the very act of pushing the rock, not because it will get him anywhere, but because it is through this conscious effort that he affirms his human dignity. When you stop expecting life to give you a ready-made purpose and take responsibility for creating your own meaning, every small act of creation, love, courage, or beauty becomes a victory against absurdity. Not a victory that solves the fundamental problem of existence, but a victory that affirms that, even in the face of cosmic indifference, we choose to live with awareness, authenticity, and compassion. This is, perhaps, the most precious discovery that emerges from the painful but necessary price of seeing the world as it really is.